To lead our discussion today, I'd like to introduce you to the session moderator, Dr. Albert Friedman. Dr. Friedman, or Al as he prefers to be called, has a unique voice as a psychologist and the father of an adult son living with the rare disease spinal muscular atrophy. He speaks nationally and internationally on the emotional challenges facing families with special healthcare needs and provides consultation to healthcare and rare disease organizations, biopharmaceutical companies, and schools. As a practicing psychologist in independent practice in the Philadelphia area, Al has provided counseling services to children, adolescents, adults, and families for over 20 years. And now I will turn it over to Al to kick us off. Thank you again so much for being here with us.
Hello, everybody. My name is Dr. Al Friedman, and I'm coming to you from picturesque Westchester, Pennsylvania. I'm honored to be here to moderate our session on building resilience in a time of unknowns. I am a practicing psychologist, but more importantly, for the purpose of this conference, father of a young man, Jack, who's now 26 years old and was diagnosed with spinal muscular atrophy. So from both professional and personal experience, I feel qualified, mostly by the wonderful training of raising my son, to help moderate this group of esteemed panelists who I'd like to introduce to you now. First, Lauren Bryant is a first-year graduate student at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. She's pursuing a master's degree in education, specifically a master's in education policy, organization, and leadership, specializing in diversity and equity in education. After graduation, Lauren plans to work for a college or university's disability services office as an accommodation specialist. In her free time, she enjoys music and singing, writing, and spending time with friends. Second, Connie Montgomery was educated at Francis Marion University and the Medical University of South Carolina. She works closely with three groups within the National Hemophilia Foundation: the Steps for Living Task Force, Annual Conference Planning Committee, and the Cultural Diversity Working Group. She also serves with the NHF Speakers Bureau. Connie is active in her local community of Pawleys Island, South Carolina, as a retired business owner and occupational therapist. She has been married for 30 years and has 2 adult children. In her spare time, she enjoys traveling. And last but not least, my friend David Rose has an ultra-rare condition called Occipital horn syndrome. And my apologies, David, if I pronounce that incorrectly. He has been doing talks on rare disease life for the last 7 years at various events and conferences. David works for Rare Revolution magazine, a magazine focusing on rare diseases. Alongside his work at the magazine, David volunteers for a cause close to his heart, Great Ormond Street Hospital. David joined Mitrofanov Support as a trustee in January. I thank all three of you for being part of our panel today, and I'd like to begin by having each of you share your reflections on building resilience in a time of unknowns for our rare disease community. And I'd like to begin by reintroducing Lauren. Lauren, it's all yours, and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to have the opportunity to be here with other really fantastic advocates.
Thank you for coming, Lauren. Why don't you share with us your reflections on building resilience? How has building resilience been a part of your life? Share what you would like with our audience today.
So I was born with a rare genetic disorder called osteogenesis imperfecta. Don't worry, I don't expect anyone to be able to pronounce or spell that. it's a hard one. And the main feature of this diagnosis is that I fracture bones extremely easily. I turn 26 next month, and I've broken over 300 bones. Not like individual bones, and the same ones multiple times. But I have fractured a bone over 300 times in my life. And it can be really frustrating, especially now as a young adult, because unlike when I was a child, where it was a pretty traumatic experience, now I just kind of see it as a minor annoyance where I'm like, really? Can we not do this today? I have things to do. I'm busy. I can't take time out of my life to kind of sit around and just let things heal. I have to just kind of keep going. Obviously, I have to be careful and make sure I don't make things any worse than they already are. But it's, breaking things so often has kind of forced me to be like, okay, I can't just sit around and do nothing and wait for this to heal. I have to just kind of keep going and do what I can to minimize the amount of pain that I'm in, but also recognize I just snapped a bone into 2 pieces. I'm gonna be in pain, especially if I am going out and doing things anyway. So that's been a really big part of resilience for me. And I also think that being in the middle of a pandemic, as we still currently are, I don't care what the CDC says, we're still in a pandemic. It's been really hard. I'm a very extroverted person. I love people. I don't like being by myself for long periods of time because I get stuck in my own head, and we all know that that's sometimes not a very fun place to be. And it was really hard, especially last year when we were all quarantining for 5 months. I tried to find things to do. I read a lot of books. And I think I just tried to remind myself that eventually we would come out of this someday. We didn't really know when. I thought it was going to be much longer before things started going back to normal. And it wasn't as long as I thought it was going to be. And I think that one of the things was help me get through life a lot. Really cliche is, this too shall pass. Stuff's gonna happen, and some of it's gonna be really terrible, and it's gonna suck. But eventually it'll be over, and things can always get better. Things can also always get worse, but I choose to believe that things can always get better.
Lauren, thank you very, very much for sharing those comments, and thank you for being part of our panel today. Lauren, was there anything else you'd like to add before we move on to Connie?
No, you can go ahead and move on. I'm good.
Thank you, Lauren. Connie, welcome back. I'd love to hear your reflections on building resilience in these times of uncertainty from your perspective in your life.
Thank you. I want to thank Nord for this opportunity to share with everyone. And I really want to thank Lauren for sharing her story with us. It's so encouraging and inspiring. Thank you. It's very uplifting. My name is Connie Montgomery, as we talked about earlier. I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I'm a retired occupational therapist, and currently I'm a volunteer patient and family advisor at the Medical University of South Carolina. I absolutely enjoy that, meeting new family members and new patients that, just got diagnoses that they can't imagine how they're going to move forward with, but then learn gradually that they can make it too and they'll be okay. I was reared in a home where we did not share sicknesses or illnesses or struggles that we had. It was thought in the home where I was raised was that what happens at home stays at home. However, I found as I got older and encountered a lot with my sicknesses and my illnesses that that wouldn't be the case for me. I would need help. But the reason why I was reared that way is because my mom and a lot of my family members learned that being sick or having an illness wasn't always looked at positive light or an encouraging light. It was looked at as a weakness or a stereotype of um, unkind judgment of some sort. So for years, my health issues kept them to myself. Constant nosebleeds, spontaneous bleeds from whatever opening was on my body. We kept things like that to ourselves. The bruising, the bleeding in the joints, the limited mobility and movement, all of that kept it to myself. Um, as I got older and needed more help, things started to change. And it certainly changed one day when I ran a car accident. When I got into the car accident, I had to be rushed to, of course, the emergency room. And after being rushed to the emergency room, I learned I had not one rare disorder, but two. Uh, Factor 7 deficiency, which is a clotting disorder where my blood does not clot properly like others. Also, pemphigus vulgaris and foliaceus, where the soft mucous membrane tissue of my body breaks down from autoimmune dysfunction. So getting that news was quite overwhelming. And to be honest, it put me in a state that was not the best. I became depressed and went through a lot with that. Um, but I started in 2011 to research and reach out for help from the National Hemophilia Foundation, the Hemophilia Federation of America, and CHES, Comprehensive Health Education Services. And those particular companies and organizations and nonprofits did a lot of work with rare bleeding disorders and bleeding disorders. So getting educated, going to conferences, learning about my rare disorder helped me greatly because I saw other people who were living and living well with their disorders. I saw other people doing great things, even though they had all of this to deal with. And I knew that even though culturally I was reared not to put all my business on the boulevard, I knew it was time that I had to do exactly that to network, reach out, and get help. And that's what I did. And I'm very thankful I did because I learned that having these rare disorders like pemphigus vulgaris and foliaceus and factor 7 deficiency, I learned that these disorders are my superpowers. I got to meet people on the planet that I would have never gotten the opportunity to meet. I got to learn creative ways of doing things that I would not have otherwise. And like the opportunity in this moment right here, the triumph of having the opportunity to speak to people all over the globe about my rare disorders. I mean, this is absolutely great. So being resilient in uncertain times is just taking day by day, doing what we do to have to live with these disorders. And I know that's the way it is for me right now. And I see myself as a person who's rare. Yes, but I use that rare acronym in another way. I see myself as a person with real aspirations, um, revolutionizing every day. So that's the rare that I see. And I believe we can take the things that we go through with our disorders and our diseases in this rare community, and we can help other people in the overall community at large learn how to cope with uncertain times, just the way we do every single day, being rare. Thank you guys.
Thank you, Connie. Thank you for your energy, enthusiasm, and positive spirit as you share your experience. I can relate to it as a dad very much. I'm grateful to have you today. Um, David Rose, all the way from the United Kingdom, thank you for joining us. Um, let's hear from you and your experience with building resilience in these times of uncertainty.
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone. I'd just like to say, obviously, thank you very much for Nord for having me again. Obviously, I really appreciate the opportunity, and obviously, thank you very much, Al, for taking the time to host this panel. There's lots of different things that I think that I'd like to bring up, so I'll kind of do like a little mini run through, and I'm sure we'll come back to them in more detail as it goes on. A lot of what Lauren and Connie said resonated with me for different reasons. I think everybody's kind of got the same happy-go-lucky approach to life, and I think that's really important. I think everybody chooses their own kind of path with a rare disease, and I think certainly I found that being as upbeat and positive about it as possible is really important. So the condition that I have is called Occipital horn syndrome. It's a ultra rare condition affecting just a handful of people globally. Haven't managed to find anyone in England or the UK with it just yet. So I found a couple of people in Europe, but it's still really quite an unknown condition. So it's linked to something called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a lot more well known now, and also something called Menkes disease. So it's got a kind of crossover with other conditions, but it's still really rare. Growing up, obviously I missed lots of school. I've found work life difficult in the past. I've always been kind of in and out of hospital, having operations and just clinic appointments and just kind of like day-to-day living. I think with the kind of happy-go-lucky style and being resilient, I think sometimes in a strange way, I sometimes have to, I think it's called Imposter Syndrome, where you kind of forget that you're ill because you try so hard to ignore it, and then sometimes you're reminded of it. So I think a lot of people with a rare disease, and obviously myself included, my health definitely goes up and down kind of very dramatically, and sometimes it's a minute by minute thing, and sometimes it's a year by year. So it's just really unpredictable, and I think that kind of molds you as a person. I think obviously we're bound to talk about COVID a bit more during this panel, but I think COVID has obviously affected everybody differently, but I think a lot of people with rare disease probably were kind of mentally maybe prepared slightly better than the healthy population, just because a lot of people in the rare disease community are used to shielding or kind of close to shielding anyway. So I think the mentality of rare disease patients, I think we're actually probably were better set up in some ways. Kind of away from COVID, I think that my resilience has come from actually being honest and talking about my health. So obviously I try and be as positive and try and be as happy-go-lucky as I can, but obviously I can't always do that. Kind of when I was about 21, so after I'd finished my university degree, I found it really difficult. And I think it's obviously quite a crucial point in every young person's life at that point. I found it really difficult, and I was going through a really rough patch health-wise, and mentally I declined massively, but I didn't really understand. I wasn't overly familiar with mental health. It's it's often not talked about enough. I think it's getting better now, either in the rare disease community and also kind of just the healthier community outside of that. So I think it's important, to talk about mental health, and I think a lot of the time, I kind of stumbled into the rare disease like talks that I do, for the charity and for work and as a personal advocate. I didn't really kind of foresee myself doing that, but actually I think that being open and talking about mental health as well as physical health is really important. But yeah, lots of things obviously I can talk about. I think my friends and family and my girlfriend are crucial to helping me. It's not just a personal battle with a rare disease. It's often the wider, your friends, your family, your colleagues, your partners, whoever that may be. I think everyone has a really important role to play, and I feel very lucky that I've got a really great support network around me. But there's lots of things we can talk about, but maybe we can kind of go to that in more detail. And thank you very much.
David, thank you very much. It's an honor to cross paths with you again, and to
Likewise.
meet Connie and Lauren. And I so respect and admire the grace and dignity with which you've all overcome so many obstacles. And I can relate personally to so much of what you said, not because I'm affected by a rare disease directly, and not only because I'm a psychologist who specializes in working with people with rare disease, but as a caregiver and a parent. Just to share a couple of my own reflections, my son Jack was born healthy in 1995, and then at the age of 6 months, we took him to his regular pediatrician check-in, and we were told he wasn't developing normally. And 4 days later, in a hospital with a neurologist, we were told that our baby had an incurable neuromuscular disease and wouldn't live past the age of 2. So all of a sudden, our lives were flipped entirely upside down, from having a healthy first child to having a baby who wasn't going to live past 2. And as you can imagine, that was very traumatic news. And Dr. Al, the new psychologist, needed a psychologist very quickly because we needed so much support because of the trauma associated with this change. And I feel so lucky that my son is still here 26 years later. And I asked myself, where did that resilience come from that allowed me to get out of bed every morning when I was told our baby wouldn't live very long? And I remember back in those early days looking at the smile on my son's face and telling myself that no matter how long he lived, it was my job to be a good dad for him, and so that we could look back when he was gone and know we'd given him the best life possible. So you really have to dig deep in these moments when you are affected by a rare disease and you're faced with very complicated circumstances, and all three of you have done that. I'm aware, I've studied this concept of resilience in my work, and the word resilience, it comes from the Latin term resilience ending with an S, which means to recoil or rebound. By the 1600s, the word resilience was used to mean springing back, or rebound. So all of us in our journeys in the rare disease community, whatever our role, have needed to demonstrate this springing back or rebounding in order to make meaning out of such a difficult experience. And all three of you have done that. I'd like to think I've been doing that too. And it's very hard work. But after a while, you get the hang of it. And all three of you and I believe, have. I'd like to pose a few questions at this point to all of you, and contribute as I can as well, to dig deeper into this concept of resilience, especially in these uncertain times. My first question to our panel is, in your lives, what has contributed to your ability to be resilient? If resilience was a cooking dish, what are the ingredients? What are the ingredients to you that lead to resilience for you and to others who find themselves faced with these types of challenges? Who'd like to take a crack at that one? Ingredients of resilience.
Yeah, I'll have a go. I guess obviously there's different kinds. I think kind of from I guess life experiences. Growing up, if I looked at my friends and when everybody was growing, I didn't start growing. I didn't hit puberty. I looked very different. I was always the smallest. I've always been the thinnest, and when I was growing up, it was I wasn't bullied as such, but I always felt very different, and I was always very isolated. It was very obvious, kind of playing sports and doing activities. Everybody could see all of my joints completely out of place. I just looked very different. I think that being kind of, although I had lots of friends, I always felt it's a kind of strange way of explaining it, but I always felt on the end of being on friends with people, kind of when I was growing up at sort of maybe secondary school. I think that makes you quite a resilient person, because you're used to just being a bit different, and that's your help, I guess.
Thank you, David. Connie or Lauren, any comments on the concept of ingredients that lead to resilience for you?
For me, I would have to say definitely it would be my faith in God, my prayer life, and just taking in nature and the beauty around me. Taking so much of the focus off of me and what's going on with me, to me, within me, and looking at all the beauty around me. I don't live far from the ocean, so just the sounds and just all of that, and though I'm legally blind, I try to take in just the vastness and the greatness of what's out there in the ocean. All of that helps me be resolved to do whatever I need to do to make it through the day, regardless of what's happening with me medically. Those are the type of things that allow me to be resilient. And another thing is sort of two things: music therapy, listening to music that's uplifting, that motivates me. That That's wonderful for me. And I think it would be helpful for others as well as smells. I love wonderful smells. I love aromatherapy. I love the smell of peppermint. I love the smell of lavender, those type of things. That's what allows me. Those are the tools that help me and the ingredients that help me be more resilient.
Thank you, Connie. Lauren, is there anything
Thank
you'd
you.
like to add? Thank you.
Yeah, I relate really to both David and Connie. Like David, growing up, I always looked very different from all of the other kids that I went to school with. Not only because I am a very small person, but I was typically the only wheelchair user in my class. And even if I wasn't the only wheelchair user in my school, I was typically the only one who had purely a physical disability. It didn't come along with any cognitive issues as well. So it was pretty unique, but nobody ever seemed to notice, or if they did notice, they didn't make it obvious. Um, Especially in elementary and middle school, kids who are that young are very accepting. They're not overly concerned with how somebody looks or that they do things a little bit differently. They just are happy that you are their friend and they can play with you and do whatever. But I've always been just kind of a naturally optimistic person, which I feel like irritates the heck out of some of my friends because I have some pessimist friends who are a little less Pollyanna, happy-go-lucky than I am. But I just don't see the point in convincing yourself that everything's going to be terrible all the time. Because it's not. Like I said earlier, things can always get better. They will get better if you have a little bit of hope, have a little bit of faith. I'm also a big music person. I always tell people if I'm not listening to music, you know that there's something wrong, that I must not be feeling well because I'm listening to something pretty much all the time. I tell people it's like I have an iPod in my brain because there's always some kind of song stuck in my head. Music's always been really helpful, and having a support network is huge. And it's something I didn't start seeing the value of really until probably this year. I always had people who I could talk to, but never really kind of a dedicated group of people that I know I could go to and be like, hey, this is going on, it's really bothering me, can I talk to you about it? And it's not even necessarily people with my diagnosis or other, disabled people. It's other friends I have who are not disabled, but because they're friends with me, they've developed kind of this deeper understanding of disability and disability issues. And they tend to be really good people to talk to just because they don't have that implicit bias that I think a lot of people in the disability community can have regarding types of disabilities and things like that. So I think my three biggest ingredients are music, a support network, and just kind of homegrown, built-in optimism.
Thank you, Lauren. I'm grateful to all three of you for your responses, but I love homegrown optimism. I feel that from you. I've felt it from my own son for years, and I understand what that means. And thank you for that. Um, Another question I want to tag on to something that Connie alluded to earlier, which is other people whose paths we cross. And many of us have been influenced by others whose paths have preceded ours or crossed ours. And I'm wondering who has inspired each of you to help be resilient. Connie, you mentioned you wouldn't have met many people you've met if you didn't have this unusual challenge. I feel the same way. I wouldn't be on here and I wouldn't know the three of you if I had a healthy son. He's led me to some extraordinary people who've influenced me in my path in very profound ways. So I'm wondering who's inspired you along the way, whose path you've crossed, that's helped you to get to the point you are in terms of that homegrown optimism that Lauren just spoke of.
Uh, Al, I'd have to say so many wonderful people. I've been blessed to meet along this journey after finding out I have a rare bleeding disorder, factor 7 deficiency. Namely, one of the people that I've met from Washington State. It was Barb Foss. She started Ladybugs Foundation, and it's a foundation for women with rare bleeding disorders. And she's, I think, in her 70s now, and she is absolutely wonderful. But when she started this journey many, many years ago, of course, it was thought that only men had bleeding issues like hemophilia and rare bleeding disorders, and not women. And she was told she would never find another person like her. And she and I have the exact same factor 7 deficiency, rare disorder, that's found one in about 500,000 people. And when I met her, I was just so inspired because even though I feel like I was blessed to come along in a time where technology and advances and all of this is available, and so much information and education and conferences are available for folk with rare bleeding disorders like factor 7, I think she came along in a different time, in a different space when all of that wasn't. But what she did was she created a community out of her need for a community, out of her need for a support system. That's what started Ladybugs Foundation, which is now a part of CHES, one of the programs that I mentioned earlier, Comprehensive Health Education Services out of Massachusetts. They sort of run it now because, she's passed it over to them. But once a year, all we women with rare bleeding disorders come together for support and a retreat where we uplift and encourage each other. That even though you have the rarest of the rarest bleeding disorders, you can still make it, you can still manage. And one of my favorite saying is, and I learned this just over the years watching Barb and other women, know that your diagnoses does not determine your possibilities. And she's a wonderful example of that for me. She and so many other women that live day by day with whatever disorders or whatever disease they have, continuing to just strive forward.
Thank you, Connie, very much. David?
Yeah, I think it's a few different people, to be fair. Kind of a bit of a crossover, I guess, with Connie. Some of the doctors that I've had the pleasure of being seen by over the years, they've been really influential. I've always been really lucky to have really supportive doctors. I've always known I've had something unusual, but obviously it wasn't until I was 26 that I had the actual genetic condition that after being all the tests for that. So there's lots of different doctors that I've seen in Cambridge and in London that I'm very thankful that I've been able to be seen by. Through my work at the magazine, obviously my colleagues and their sort of motivations with the magazine, the people that I've met at conferences and things around the world, rare disease community on social media. I think that there's been so many people that, although I've never actually met in person anybody with the same condition as me, and I probably never will, I guess at some, well, who knows, but I've had the pleasure of meeting people with all different kinds of conditions, and there's always so much you can learn from other people with a rare condition. It doesn't matter if it's the same or not the same condition. It doesn't matter where you live. There's so much crossover with different rare diseases and sort of the battles that you go through. And I think that everyone is so inspiring, and I've just learned so much from people, even if I've never actually met them in person.
David, thank you so much for that. And Lauren, who's inspired you?
So, two of my biggest inspirations, besides, much like David, a lot of the wonderful people I've met through social media, one of them is Stella Young, who had the same diagnosis as I did, osteogenesis imperfecta, and she did a fantastic TED Talk called "I'm Not Your Inspiration, Thank You Very Much." And she talks about what's known as inspiration porn, which is kind of this idea that non-disabled people tend to view people with disabilities as kind of these objects where we exist to be inspirational to other people. And it can be for something as simple as, going to the grocery store. People stop somebody and go, "Oh my God, you're so inspiring. I could never do what you do." And I remember seeing that talk for the first time. And first, seeing somebody who looks like me, who has the same diagnosis as I do, was incredible. Because I very rarely see people like me in any form of media. And seeing her give a talk that was just so excellent and so well received by so many people inspired me as much as maybe she wouldn't have appreciated being inspirational. It was incredibly moving. And I think the other person, her name is Gemma Geisman, I don't know how to pronounce her last name. But she was kind of the impetus for creating the Osteogenesis Imperfecta Foundation and the OIF. She helped to establish the OI Support Group Network. She helped to organize the first national and regional conferences for the OIF, and this was all the way back in 1970 when her son was born with OI. Because prior to that, we didn't have anything. We didn't have a foundation, we didn't have conferences, there were no support groups. And now we have a whole foundation with a lot of social media presence, which is how I've gotten to meet so many other people with OI. Is through a direct result of all the work she did, almost 51 years ago now. So they are definitely two of my biggest kind of inspirations, and I want to be like both of them when I get older. I want to keep advocating for myself and for other people, and that's kind of where my career path will hopefully end up taking me.
All right, thank you. These are wonderful examples of people who pave the way for us and model for us. And in my own case, I've had many moments of inspiration from others. I think back to when my son was diagnosed and we were told he would only live till 2. And it was people like you, adults, who had lived with spinal muscular atrophy, the condition my son has, who inspired me. I'm thinking of a friend named Mary Jane Ossie who lived in Wisconsin, who wrote a letter to our support group in a newsletter way back in the 90s. And she said, "Dear parent of newly diagnosed baby with SMA, I know this is a devastating time for you, but I hope you will give your baby a chance. And please don't do what my parents did, my dad did. When I was born, they told my parents I'd only live till 2. And when I was 2, they told my parents I'd live till 4. And when I was 4, they told my parents to live till 6. And my dad kind of was waiting for me to die. Please don't do that to your baby. I'm now 54 years old, and I have a partner and a job and a fulfilled life. And my dad's been gone for 25 years. So I read this letter, and it gave me a different perspective as a parent on how to approach my very uncertain situation with my son. Mary Jane inspired me. The doctors and nurses, David, you mentioned professionals. The way I look at it is none of us choose to have a rare disease. And I didn't choose to have a son with a rare disease in a wheelchair and a ventilator, feeding tube. But other people make a choice to help us. And I wouldn't be able to be on here moderating this panel if it wasn't for the Nurse Athena, who's taking care of my son for 12 hours today so that I can work. And the doctors who've cared for him in the intensive care unit 300 nights over 20 years. They're very special people who we cross paths with, who make a choice to get involved to help us, even when we haven't chosen this path for ourselves. And those people inspire me. And I also want to mention the conference. County, you mentioned the annual meeting of your support group. Our annual meeting is such a beautiful experience, and I have the privilege of facilitating support group for the children who are affected by SMA. So I'm the only one in the room without a wheelchair, and these children are so eloquent, so articulate, have such positive attitudes, and they fuel me every year. These children fuel me because of their perspective. So we all, as we move through our lives affected by rare disease, cross paths with many types of inspirational people in many forms. And you've You shared some great examples and you brought back some memories for me. Thank you for that. I have a couple more questions. Um, I'm wondering if there was a turning point for each of you, like a moment in time when you moved from an earlier place of discouragement or despair to a place of hope and resilience. I wonder if you can identify a turning point for you in your lives as you've taken this path to where you are now.
I would say I never really felt a lot of despair. I think it was just internalizing a lot of what society tells us about disabled people, which is that our lives are kind of lesser. We won't have as many opportunities as non-disabled people. And then when I started college, I met a lot of other people my age who had disabilities. And I got more involved in kind of the disability rights side of social media and advocacy. And I think that's what made me go, hey, everything that I used to think when I was a kid isn't true. None of this is accurate. I have limitations that I accept and I deal with every day. There are also plenty of things that I can do to help kind of push myself and other disabled people forward in life. And it's so easy, I think, to let yourself fall into this, oh, poor me, my life is so hard kind of mindset. But then I look at the other people around me who are fighting every single day for my rights and the rights of people like me. And it's kind of like, well, I can't let myself just sit around and feel sorry for myself. I want to help participate in this. So I think coming to college and getting involved in disability rights is probably my biggest turning point.
Thank you, Lauren. I've been to your campus actually a couple of times in the last year. I can picture where you are, and it's a wonderful community and looks like very supportive.
I couldn't ask to be on a better campus. I really couldn't.
That's my sense. Thanks for sharing. Connie?
I would definitely have to say, repeat that question for me again. I want to make certain that I get every part of it.
Sure, sure. Connie, what I asked was if there was a turning point for us, a moment in time when you moved from a place of discouragement or despair to a place of hope and resilience, which you clearly demonstrate now.
I would definitely have to say it was maybe 6 or 7 months after the car accident and the diagnoses, because initially I was quite depressed, just pulling all of it together and just receiving and accepting all of that hard news. Because not only did I have the diagnoses of rare factor 7 deficiency and pemphigus vulgaris and foliaceous, and even though you look at me physically, I looked like nothing was wrong. All of this was going on internally very wrong, and it just, it just threw me for a loop. But I learned that I also had hypertension, diabetes, legally blind, and just had an uphill battle. So at first it was quite hard for me, and I just didn't know initially how I was going to deal, how I was going to cope, how I was going to overcome, because, it was just so much at one moment in time. And my roles as a wife, a mother, those roles did not stop so that I could get a moment to cope with and learn how to work with and get the medical interventions and the things that I needed for my rare disorders. I had to learn how to do all of this simultaneously. I had to learn how to adjust simultaneously. So it was, yeah, 6 or 7 months after diagnoses of the two rare disorders and the other comorbidities that I learned that, okay, I got to get up from here. I've got to make it. And I started focusing on others around me who were in similar situations who were doing exactly that. They were moving forward, they were forging forward, they were making it, and I could do it also.
Connie, thank you again for that. The energy's coming right through my computer. I appreciate it. David,
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So I think probably, I guess the turning point maybe would have been in my early 20s. I kind of previously said about that I didn't realize how mentally sort of I was struggling. I think with living with this rare condition. I think that as it went on, it helped. I think working has given me back the purpose again. And I'm obviously appreciative for that. Obviously, meeting the people in the community has made a big difference as well. So it's a few different things really, but that's probably just like having the purpose in the
thank
rare
you.
community has
Thank
made
you
a big
all.
difference.
I think back, as I'm asking you these questions, are triggering memories for me. I'm thinking back 25 years to a moment that was a turning point for me when I was grieving the loss of a dream of a child and trying to figure out a way to prepare myself to lose my first child. I looked at him and I felt so sad and felt like crying. And he looked back at me smiling and laughing and just so happy to be on my lap. So I think a turning point for me early on was my own son's positive attitude, which he still has. He was so little, he was a baby, he didn't know there was a problem. I knew there was a big problem, but he didn't. So he led me to be a better dad to him because of his affect and his joy for life, which he still does. Um, so thank you for prompting that memory for me, all three of you. I have another question for all of you. Um, there's a lot of uncertainty, great uncertainty in the world right now because of COVID and many other things in our country and our world that are uncertain. It's been a rough year for everybody in this time of uncertainty, COVID. Um, in this time of great uncertainty, what advice do you have for others in our rare disease community? What advice would you give our rare community members in terms of demonstrating resilience during such uncertain times? And I believe that Lauren had to part ways with us at this point because of her time commitment. So, Connie, David, um, would you like to take a crack at that one? Advice for others in the community.
I would definitely say self care is absolutely vital at this time. Take time for yourself to just stop everything and just be still. Just enjoy life. Just enjoy inhaling and exhaling. I mean, very basic, right? But so important. Also, self advocacy. It's okay to share with your healthcare team exactly what you're going through. It's exactly okay to share whether it's a mental concern or a physical concern. It's a concern. It's okay to self advocate for the type of care that you need. So, self care now and self advocacy. Um, I think these two things are going to be very important for not just myself, but anyone with a rare disorder living in uncertain times. Um, to be able to move forward and to move forward well.
Thank you, Connie. David?
Yeah, that's a good point Connie made. I think probably from my perspective, we've tried to avoid the news as much as possible. I think it's obviously you can't really avoid sort of seeing COVID everywhere you look, but I think probably certainly from in my perspective in the UK, obviously it's everywhere on the news. So just limiting the amount of time you're watching or reading things is probably a good idea.
Thank you, David. I I feel both of your points are very meaningful and relevant in my own life. The other piece of advice that I'd add, both as a practicing psychologist and as a parent, is to stay connected to other people. COVID has forced us to be apart from each other when human beings need to be connected with each other. And those of us who are affected by rare diseases already, in many cases, are isolated or feel isolated because of medical fragility and limitations physically. This isn't new for me. I've had to protect my son from illnesses for 26 years. A common cold would put us in the intensive care unit. Um, so it's hard to stay connected to other people when fragility and limitations push us apart. And I think staying connected to each other, to NORD, to our rare disease advocacy groups, to anybody in our families who we know and love, and friends who we know and love, is worth more than money. Connection is how I feel is really, really important. I'm going to wrap up with one last question for our panel, which is, what do you wish you knew when your rare journey began that you know now? What do you wish you knew then that you know now? And how has what you wish you knew then that you know now helped you to overcome adversity and be resilient? What do you wish you knew then?
So that's a bold question.
Yeah, got to finish with a bold question, Dave.
Ooh, I don't know. I don't know if this kind of answers the question, but obviously, I'll answer it kind of from my perspective, and maybe it's a larger rare disease community perspective, possibly. I think a lot of the time when people get diagnosed with something rare or ultra rare or somewhere in the middle, I think a lot of people feel very sort of trapped or isolated or lonely, or kind of not really sure the best word to use there, but something to that. I think it's important that although your life might change, or the treatment pathways you go down, or how you navigate work life or education or friendships, family relationships, all those kind of things that happen in day-to-day life. I think it's important that there's other people going through the same thing, and there is help out there for lots of different things, whether that's there's always somebody out there to help you. I don't know if that really answers the question, but that's kind of what I'm trying
Thank
to
you,
say.
David. That answered the question beautifully. Connie, thoughts?
Definitely. Um, two thoughts mainly. Taking a positive attitude toward whatever it is you're facing, that's going to be key. How you're going into the situation, how you're going into dealing with others, just taking the positive attitude with you. And the second thing would be cultivating friendships and partnerships with people who've already experienced some of the things that you're going to experience, because these folks know some things. They know where the resources are. They know the adaptations you need to make. They know how to help you persevere.
Thank you, Connie, very much. I think what I wish I knew 25 years ago was we have to, we spend a lot of times when we're new at this studying the disease and learning as much as we can
Mm.
about it, and getting help for the medical situations we find ourselves in, which is perfectly understandable. And that's what I did. But I realized early on that I was so busy chasing doctors and research and information that I wasn't spending as much time with my son as I should have been. I was busy trying to save him. So what I wish I knew then that I know now is enjoy every single day for yourself and with your family members, and balance out that uh, natural desire to find out about the problem you have with the important experience of enjoying life. That's the first one, and the second one for me is something my son always says, which is never give up. Anything is possible. And 25 years later, babies who are born with this same disease are now walking after receiving gene therapy treatment, which is something that was just a dream all those years ago for the rare disease community. Uh, so never give up. I believe what the doctors told me, that our son wouldn't be here past 2, and I understand and respect why they gave us that prognosis. But my son has taught me and many others that anything is possible, and we should never give up.